Hello and welcome to the channel where we talk about all things Weiss Schwarz and chill with friends. My name is Liam and today I want to talk about BCS UK 2023 and the set representation data. Now if you are new to the channel, please consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you enjoy what we do here, please let me know by hitting that like button. As well as that, check out my other social medias on Twitch, on X and on Discord. The links are down in the description below. But let's jump straight in. Now, I'm sure if you're a Weiss Schwarz player, at least in the competitive scene, you will be paying attention to the BCS or Bushiroad Championship Series 2023 and the results that have been occurring throughout the year. And, well, let's be honest, Bushiroad are not the best when it comes to visibility on tournament data, especially set representation. Now, thankfully, there are some fantastic members of the community, specifically Weiss and Alexander, who have been speaking with the community, have been getting set and deck codes, and been able to represent at least some data. Weiss Tea Time specifically focuses on the top 8 decks across all BCS tournaments, and whilst they haven't got every single deck, they've done an incredibly amazing job. So please make sure you check out the link in the description below if you want to see the top 8 decks that are available for the BCS 2023 season. Alexander as well, mentioning him, he does a fantastic thing where he creates a Google Sheet where people who have attended BCSs are able to input their set data and does collect, like, I guess, an archive of all players that have played. Obviously, that is very reliant on the community. So if you are a member of the community and you are willing to share the deck that you played for the sake of data and set representation, please make sure you check out on the Weiss Schwarz Global Community Facebook page, and there is a link somewhere regarding the data that was being collected and the request from Alexander, and I'll see if I can find the link and put it in the description below where if you want to input your data, you can do so below. Now for BCS UK 2023, I was head judge for Weiss Schwarz, and as part of that, I did ask Bushiroad, and I have got permission to be able to share the set representation of all players for that event. And in today's video, I'm going to cover, again, some general trends, as well as some analysis that I will be able to provide on a overall title level, and also deep diving into specific titles that were represented highly. So starting off with the raw data and the set representation as a whole, there were 88 players, of which 25 different titles were represented. The most represented titles being Hololive with 16 players, Quintessential Quintuplets with 13 players, and Avatar: The Last Airbender with 10. This being 39 of 88 players, representing 44.3% of all players that participated. The other titles in order of their representation was... Now some initial insights from just the set representation. First of all, Slime and Sword Art Online, their representation has massively dropped, and I do believe that is due because of the restriction list update that happened, obviously basically killing the Alice deck, and also the consistency of Slime being slightly reduced by hitting the Muran and the Shizu combos. Another note to make regarding the restriction list, Mushoku Tensei and 7 Deadly Sins, I don't think saw a massive increase in the decks being represented. I think the restriction list has then shown that the changes that have been made have been good, they have been balanced, and that they haven't made the sets any more super relevant in the meta or any more broken. It's also incredibly interesting to see that of the 7 Deadly Sins, there was one that top cut, but it didn't even involve the Escanor, and I'll come back to that later. Another interesting point was the high representation of Avatar. We've seen Avatar doing well, and we've seen a lot of top cuts made for Avatar, specifically the Bar Standby build using Toph and Azula, and I think that the set itself is a very strong set, and people have started to realise that, and throughout the tournaments that have happened, anecdotally at least from what I've heard, the representation of Avatar has been increasing. I guess a couple of other shocks as well. Overlord, I expected to see more representation, and it hasn't seen that much, and I partly think that's down to the difficulty of getting the set 1 Overlord cards that make the set really good. And I also think that at the moment in time, the meta is not set for Overlord. I think that whilst it had some extremely prominent play in the Japanese format, it is not seeing that in the English meta, and I think that's due to decks such as 7 Deadly Sins and Avatar. Apart from that, I think we could expect the representation we saw. I think, again, expecting Hololive and Quintessential Quintuplets to be the highest, just because one, they're very popular sets, and two, they're actually quite diverse set. I'm not surprised to see those so highly represented, and for those sets specifically, I will be going into an actual title breakdown to actually go down into what sort of decks were played within those sets. Starting with Hololive, 16 players out of 88, which is 18.18% of players actually use Hololive for the event. And unsurprisingly, ASCII Gura was the most represented set, with 7 out of 16 being 43.75% of players using some form of ASCII Gura deck. The other decks used, Chloe Marine had 2 representations, ASCII Polka had 2 representations, and Korone Marine Shioko, ASCII Caligura, Mume Rusha, ASCII Nene, and Fubuki Oli Marine all had 1 representation. Going into the specific combos themselves, 10 of the 16 decks used the ASCII level 0 standby combo, and 8 of the 16 used the Gura level 3 pants combo. Now what's even more interesting is that Gura did not get a single representation in the top 8 cut for BCS UK. And I think that actually confirms what we've been hearing from other BCSs. Everyone's been worried about Gura as a finisher. It's an extremely potent finisher. However, the meta at the moment means that Gura runs out of steam and therefore actually hasn't got the ability to use its combo by the time it gets to the point to try and finish its turn. And people play around Gura where they will force themselves to go to level 3 first and then try and beat Gura decks from late to level 2, so 2-5, 2-6. And people have learned how to play around Gura despite its potency. And it was interesting to see that of the ASCII Gura decks that actually completed the day, only 1 of them finished X2. Moving on to Quintessential Quintuplets, of the 13 players, 5 players chose Ichika Choice, 5 players chose Nino Standby, and 3 players chose Itsuki Door. And what was even more interesting, of those 13 players, none of them made top cut. Now, what does this say about Quintessential Quintuplets in the English meta? At least from this tournament, does Quintessential Quintuplets perform? Yes, it does show that from the Quintessential Quintuplets players that completed, there were 3 players that all finished X2. So there was a real good performance in general for Quintessential Quintuplets, but does it do enough in the current meta, especially with the potential, especially in the UK, where we tend to see a lot more rogue decks or anti-meta decks come into the play? I don't think Quints at the moment, I don't think it works in the UK. Now, will that change if the premium booster that's been announced for Japanese comes to English? Who knows? I think it very well could. They've already had some reveals from that set. I do think there is an opportunity for Quintessential Quintuplets' biggest downfall of not having a stock swap. I think there is the potential of that actually happening, and if that does, we could see a lot of different changes and a lot more representation of Quintessential Quintuplets. Moving on to Avatar: The Last Airbender, we saw the joint first represented deck of the entire day being Bar Standby Avatar with Toph and Azula, matching ASCII Gura's representation of 7 players using the deck. But of the other 3 decks, we also had an 8 bar build, an 8 standby build, and an interesting bar pants build. Now, I think, again, from other data that have been showing up, and as well as the other top 8 results, Toph Azula is absolutely the deck to play for Avatar if you want to perform extremely well. Not only that, I genuinely believe that with the way that Avatar is, and the tweaks that the deck can have, I genuinely believe it is a strong contender to take the crown at the World Finals in February. Moving on to 7 Deadly Sins, 4 out of 6 players used the Escador Stock Soul build, but surprisingly none of those made top cut. The only 7 Deadly Sins deck that made top cut was Elizabeth into Hendrickson. And I do think that the Hendrickson build does prove that because it is a finisher with a high ceiling, it shows that the way to play the meta nowadays is to get yourself to level 3 first and beat your opponent before they even get the opportunity to have a level 3 turn. Beat them from 2-4, 2-5, 2-6. Or if you're able to beat them from 2-1, 2-2, 2-3, that could also just throw some massive spanners into decks that would normally expect to survive at that point. Some other interesting points to make: Overlord, which I expected to have a higher representation, just didn't, only had 3 players using it. And not only that as well, there were plenty of rogue decks that took part, with 3 of those actually making top cut. Gun-Gale Line 8 Door, Attack on Titan Wind Choice using the level 1 Eren combo from set 2, and Data Live Choice Pants. Now I want to take a moment to look at the data of the performance of the main titles. Now of this, I am only taking consideration the 56 players that completed all 7 rounds. And starting off with Hololive, they had 4.3 win on average during Swiss. Now obviously certain decks did better than others. Looking at the highest performing deck, which was Chloe Marine, with an average of 5 wins out of 7. Askigura had an average of 4 wins out of 7, and Aski Polka has an average of 4.5 wins out of 7. Moving on to Avatar, where, again, looking at Bar Standby specifically, it was the second best performing deck during Swift with an average of 4.8 out of 7 wins. Next, looking at Quince, we have 8 Choice and 8 Standby with an average of 4 wins out of 7, and 8 Door with an average of 3.67 out of 7. Moving on to Overlord, 3 players used it and all 3 players completed the 7th round with an average of 4.67 wins out of 7, which is still pretty damn impressive, making it the 3rd best performing deck on average throughout the day. Now please make sure you take this set of data with a pinch of salt. It is a very small population size of only 56 players, and not only that, I don't think it shows a true representation, because again, there will be certain decks that are skewing the data, just from performing well, and I think realistically, if you want to look at this data fully, we do need to look at as many decks and sets as possible, which I'm looking at you, Alexander. I hope you have some data for us coming out very soon. Moving on to Top Cut, we had 3 Hololive representations, a Chloe Marine, an Aski Polka, and a Coronet Marine with a 1-copy Shioko 2 Soul Climax. And the other 5 slots were filled with Bar Standby Avatar, Data Live Choice Pants, Gun Gal Online 8 Door, Attack on Titan Wind Choice, and 7 Deadly Sins Stock Soul Pants. And here I put together a little bracket showing the final results of the top 8 fixtures. And again, if you want to see any of these decks, please make sure you go to Weiss Tea Time in the link description below, and you can see the actual builds that we use for these top 8 decks. Some final thoughts regarding the set representation and their results. First of all, Marine from Hololive is still an extremely good finisher, down to how resourceful it is and how little stock you can use to be able to triple Marine, as well as how good the level 0 utility game is to ensure that you sculpt your hand perfectly every single turn. Avatar Bar Standby seems to be established as the deck to play for Avatar, but there are a few tech choices that was made by 2nd place finisher Nendo, where I'm sure if you look at the deck list, you'll see a few weird choices that made him stand out, as well as his skill taking him to that 2nd place finish. As mentioned already, it was amazing to see a couple of rogue decks make in there. Gun Gal Online, Attack on Titan, and Data Live also doing extremely well. Data Live, especially with the weird build that it went with, and finishing in 3rd. Fantastic job to Dominic there. And yeah, it was just interesting to see that, you know, these sort of decks that can disrupt burns, i.e. the burn ones from Gura, from the smoke screen of Gun Gal Online, to just using wind triggers and dealing with boards to disrupt them and make them use more resource than they would otherwise have to. Those sort of board disruption style of decks are proving to be very interesting in the current English meta. And finally, I think it's safe to say that the UK community has an extremely diverse and wide variety of titles and decks that are used basically for every tournament I've been to, at least, and it's proven by this data set. The fact that you're seeing decks like Disgaea, Kill la Kill, Magia Record show up, and Magia Record at one point was doing pretty well. It's really interesting to see that some players are coming, especially with more of an intention of having fun and just seeing how well the deck they love and how well it does. And it's really interesting to see people's takes on the current meta and how these decks might actually perform. But that's it for the data set, and I want to do a few thank yous. Firstly to Bushiroad for allowing me to collect and share this data with you on this video, and to Kiki from Bushiroad for actually attending the event and helping throughout the day. Secondly, I want to do a massive shout out to the judges that helped me on that day, specifically in Weiss Schwarz, with Ed, with Leon, and with Kevin, who jumped in. You guys were great throughout the day, so thank you so much. A massive thank you as well to Tobias of Blackfire. I think you ran the event very, very well as a TO, and using and mastering how Bushy Navi worked was, you know, very, very evident during Cardiff. I think you did a fantastic job, and thank you for your hard work. And finally, a massive thank you to everyone that took part during BCS Cardiff, whether that was for Weiss Schwarz or for Vanguard or for Shadowverse Evolve. It was fantastic to see you all, and, you know, to be able to facilitate as I like to do as a judge makes me so, so happy, and I'm proud to be able to help and provide for such an incredible community. But that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Again, if you are new here, please consider hitting that subscribe button, and if you enjoyed this video, please let me know by hitting that like button. As well as that, check out my other socials on Twitch, on X, and on Discord. Links are down in the description below. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!